The information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the Gold Money Foundation podcast with Andy Duncan, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
So, welcome again to the Mises Institute here in Auburn, Alabama, with me, your host on this Gold Money Foundation podcast, Andy Duncan. This afternoon, between lectures, I'm speaking to the fabulous Robert Wenzel, who is the creator of the Economics Policy Journal website, one of my favourite websites. And today he did the Henry Hazlitt Memorial Lecture. Henry Hazlitt, of course, being the author of Economics in One Lesson. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Andy. How are you today?
Very, very good. And all the better for hearing your speech. Now, Robert's speech today was on the Soviet Union and its collapse. Now, you have the, what might be slightly controversial view, that it wasn't all the kind of actions of Ronald Reagan which brought the Soviet Union down. What do you think brought the Soviet Union down?
Right. As we discussed earlier, it was really the Soviet Union, the communist system that brought down communism. Right from the start, you have people who have in their memory Reagan standing in front of the Berlin Wall in Berlin saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Well, my claim is that when Mikhail Gorbachev took power in 1985, he already was doing things, set in motion things that took down the wall. And this notion that Reagan somehow intimidated Gorbachev and that's why the wall came down is not true. Right after the death of Cheryenko, Gorbachev, after the funeral, took in the leaders of the Soviet countries, Poland, East Germany, the then Czechoslovakia, and the others, and told the leaders, the Soviet Union is no longer going to back you up if there are revolutions and rebellions in your country. We are not going to send military help. And so it's my contention that right there, right from the beginning, Gorbachev created the environment which ultimately led to the collapse of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah. Well, some people think something like the SDI, the kind of Star Wars program, was the kind of straw that broke the camel's back, and the Soviet Union tried to raise its spending to counter SDI. But you said in the speech today that the CIA themselves say that Soviet expenditures didn't change at all during the whole SDI period.
Right. Correct. There are two things that went on. First of all, you really didn't have expenditures were high in the Soviet Union for military right along, and they did not change that much during the period of SDI and the Reagan buildup. Now, I also noted during his speech there's a new book coming out by David Stockman, who is the former head of the Office of Management and Budget for part of the Reagan period, and he points out that this buildup in arms was not even the types of arms that could have been used against the Soviet Union. There was amphibious landing type gear and gear for quick in and out military escapades, the type they're seeing now. So Stockman alleges that this so-called buildup never occurred, and again he was in charge of the Office of Management and Budget, so he saw where the money was spent. And then secondly, his view was similar to mine in that the communists were collapsing of their own weight and that no military buildup was required.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to speak to you is because in the middle part of your lecture today, you were talking about Mises and his book Socialism and in his smaller book, The Economic Calculation in the Soviet and in the Socialist Commonwealth. Now, people say, well, why did it take 70 years for the Soviet Union to collapse if it was so bad? And you came up with four main reasons. The first was a drainage of a reserve where previously built-up wealth is slowly drained away by socialism, the ruin of a nation. Then there's the deterioration of capital goods, which wear out and aren't replaced. And then some places such as the Soviet Union and other countries have large mineral resources they can exploit, which were developed in a period of free market before socialism comes in. And also as well with the kind of, we'll call it the shrinkage of the population for whatever reason, there are less mouths to feed. Now, how do you think that these things can apply to, say, the modern situation, maybe in North America or Europe? The first one being the drainage of a previous reserve.
Well, that's true. What you have is you have a period where of tremendous growth, which we have had here in the United States and in Europe, where there's a lot of creativity, a lot of new technology is being developed, and we still see some of that around the edges. But because of the regulations that are continually expanding, it's less and less so, and people really haven't noticed it yet. But even as far as Silicon Valley and the internet, if you're not a company that has a contact with a venture capital firm, it's very, very difficult for you to start up and raise money the way it could have been 20 or 30 years ago. So that's sort of a bit of the reserve fund where we understood how a lot of companies started out, which no longer can because of the regulations. And as more and more regulations come, it will tend to suffocate this and make innovation and creativity much more difficult. And they especially aim at the financial industry because you have the top tier banks who are attempting to control things and create a moat so other firms can't develop. And we're going to see it in medical care with Obamacare, where it's going to be centrally planned medicine. It's going to be medicine that's directed by the powers, the elitists in the medical industry that will direct things not necessarily in the way that's most beneficial for people as far as their health, but what's most beneficial for the elitists as far as their corporate growth. So we still see a lot of the wave of technology that has brought us to this point, but that's going to dissipate. And once that dissipates, I think we're going to really see the suffocation.
Are we seeing stage 2 then as well, deterioration of capital goods and capital equipment?
That's also happening. You know, I quoted Mises during my speech talking about where you attempt to tax at very high levels the richest people, and you're seeing a lot of talk about that right now. And that's initially where Mises came up with regard to the reserve fund. And what happens is that's not the type of thing that you can just drain forever, because you're putting on these regulations, you're taxing these people, so that there's less and less of that fund to be able to go after. So you will also see more debt being raised to pay for the spending, which ultimately transfers into central bank buying of the debt, which transfers into inflation. So you're going to the problems that are coming up are much severe than anything we've experienced so far.
Well, one of the things I've kind of read recently has been the about which might save the US is the kind of fracking revolution. And that might bring us on to point 3, which is where you say the rich oil and mineral resources of the Soviet Union helped it keep going for 70 years. Do you think the fracking revolution will help the United States mask any problems, or will it not last that long?
Well, you know, the trick really is with productivity. In the 1920s, we saw this before the collapse in 1929. Many people did not realize that was a period of monetary inflation. There was no price inflation because productivity was very high. But the monetary inflation is just as bad, and really is what caused the collapse when the monetary printing stopped. We may have a period like that coming up. To the degree fracking increases the productivity in the oil sector. So you have greater supplies of oil, which put a damper on prices. Of course, oil is an important ingredient in much of the economy, so it could slow down the price inflation considerably, which would give the Federal Reserve much more freedom to print before serious price inflation kicks up.
Yeah. So do you think America might be in a kind of Japanese couple of lost decades situation there, where they can print money but prices don't seem to go up, but although there's inflation?
Yeah. You're going to see, I'm not sure if you could equate it to Japan. Japan has a very high savings rate per person. The people like to save there, which they don't here in the United States. So it's a little bit different economy. But what will happen here at some point, the money printing will become so severe. This is the most likely scenario. I mean, you could get a Federal Reserve person in there who tightens money supply, although that's very unusual. But what will happen eventually, because of the amount of government spending that's going on, you will see so much money printed that will overcome even the increases in productivity from oil and other sectors, and then the inflation will just start galloping at some point.
Okay, we'll look forward to seeing that. Now, I know you want to get back to the lectures downstairs, which are going on in a few minutes' time. So you were giving the Henry Hazlitt Memorial Lecture, and you mentioned particularly his two books, Economics in One Lesson and The Failure of the New Economist. Now, New Economics. Now, just to kind of wrap up, what do you think can you just sum up the contribution of Henry Hazlitt?
Okay, I think that Henry Hazlitt was a genius and a giant as far as being able to communicate economic thoughts and ideas in simple ways, which any thinking individual could pick up his book and really understand what he was talking about and what economics was about. And as a matter of fact, I point out that Hazlitt's book, Economics in One Lesson, this is 50 years after publication. It is still number 13 under popular economics, which is incredible. Of all books, including nonfiction, fiction, diet, personal health books, any kind of books going, all 100 million books that exist, he's in the top 0.1%, ranked number 1,300 on Amazon as far as a best-selling book. So it's phenomenal.
Yeah. And that's despite the whole text of the book being freely available on many sites around the world.
Right, correct.
Still buying it and reading it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, before I end this, I want to point out his other book, The Failure of the New Economics, is a very important book because he takes Keynes's general theory apart, page by page. It is the ultimate refutation of Keynesian economics. Anybody that reads that can debate Paul Krugman any day. That's
brilliant. And what was your Murray Rothbard quote about that book?
Oh yeah, Murray Rothbard did a private review of the book when he worked for a private foundation, and in the book he said he had next to him at his elbow the general theory, going through the theory as he was reading Hazlitt's book, to make sure he didn't find any errors or anything like that. And Rothbard completed the review by saying he found none. Hazlitt had it clear. No errors. I mean, Hazlitt had it down.
Yeah, that's incredible. Anyway, if anybody out there is listening to this and they're interested in the thoughts of Robert Wenzel, you can go and visit his website where there's about 100 articles a day pop up, economicspolicyjournal.com. And Robert, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you today.
Same here.
Subscribe to the Gold Money newsletter at www.goldmoney.com to receive email updates on new articles, videos, and iTunes podcasts from our Gold Research section.